I pledge that that Greg, our organization, will do our best to give them thorough consideration and communicate to you in due course what we feel could be constructive suggestions. I should mention that the two of us on the executive of GREN have had a total of 18 years of being members of EEAC. The other was John Jackson, who at one time was chair of the EEAC.
Thank you for your input. Is that all?
One for this, that is GREN also made a presentation to the Standing Committee on General Governance of the Provincial Legislature on aggregate matters in Southern Ontario. And in it, we paid special attention to some of the scientific studies that have been done. So at this point, I wouldn't like to make specific comments on the reports because we simply haven't had a chance to look at them because of COVID. Also, I think that there should be an interactive public meeting. I guess this would be more Dumfries' responsibility for the public. Interactive so that they have a chance to discuss and comment back and forth, as well as to the representatives of the proponent and EEAC. I hope it send some people there to listen to it too, and to the municipal government of North Dumfries.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Appreciate your input. I would open it up to the committee, or maybe Jane. I don't know if you want to proceed with the report and any response to Greg's comments.
Certainly I can do that.
Yes.
And then I see the proponent's representative also has their hand up.
Okay.
And I suspect they would like to also respond if there's anything. So I'm just going to ask Jessica to share my slides for me, and you can go right to the second one if you don't mind.
Yeah, just 1 second here.
So this aggregate application, so just for clarity, the EEAC is making a recommendation to community planning of the region of Waterloo, and that recommendation will be provided to the Township of North Dumfries through for their consideration in a Planning Act application, which will be to rezone the property to allow aggregate extraction. And in addition, we will also be providing comments to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry that would incorporate the recommendations that EEAC ultimately adopts in order for them to consider them through the approval of the site plan application under the Aggregate Resources Act. So for context purposes, the red outline shown on the slide that you see is the site that we're looking at. It's approximately 40 hectares, and they're proposing to license, I think it's just over 30 hectares of that site. So that does not include the portion of the woodland that is on the site. As this pit will basically function as an extension of pits that were previously seen by EEAC, and that includes the Cedar Creek Road site, which is immediately north of the red box shown in orange, as well as the Alps Road pit, which is immediately east or to the right, shown in orange as well. In addition to those two sites, there is an extensive amount of aggregate activity in this area based on the resource that's in the ground, and those active pits or existing ARA site licenses are shown in yellow. Okay, show me the next site. So just to zoom in a bit closer on the site and give you an idea, the 40 hectare, sorry, I keep using my mouse, but I can't do that. The 40 hectare property is the rectangular piece there. And it does include a portion of the Alps Woods ESPA, the green area. The green area is not proposed for extraction, and some of the EAC working group members as well as regional staff attended the site in 2018 to confirm the delineation of the feature, and that is being one of the recommendations in the EAC report is to adopt the delineation as you see it here. And then so the aggregate would be extracted around the ESPA, and then just would you mind going forward one more? And this is a little bit more difficult to see, but just to provide context as to how it relates to the adjacent properties. Sorry,
No, it's okay.
Wayne may not be hearing. There is proposal to provide a restoration area around the limit of the woodland, as well as some connections or linkages between the natural areas to the east, which is the Cedar, Edworthy core environmental features, and then also north to the Berries Lake tracts, as well as around the limit of Alps Wood in order to restore that and provide a linkage and buffer around that area. EAC members reviewed a number of the supporting work studies that were submitted with this application, including an environmental impact study and a restoration and management plan. There are peer reviews being undertaken on a number of items, including a hydrogeological study that was submitted. So EAC is not commenting directly or in depth on the hydrogeological study, although it was reviewed. I would note that the GRCA has also signed off on this, and so EAC, the recommendation as it's presented in the report is that there is support in principle, provided the recommendations that were identified were adopted or considered. I'm not sure. The subcommittee members were Wayne, Caston, Ken, as well as Catherine McCarter. So I'm not sure if any of the subcommittee members had anything further that they wanted to add or to clarify.
It's Wayne. I don't think so. There were a number of questions raised as the working group members are aware. And actually, Brian Zeman responded to them on Friday or Thursday. Anyways, in any event. One of the questions that arose was the apparent amount of backfill adjacent to the western area that is outside the extraction area. And we got it clarified that it is expected to have a backfill of about 3.8 million cubic meters. It does conform to the legislation as far as a statement in the site plan saying that it's inert fill may be imported for rehabilitation purposes. I guess my only question was, and I raised it, and it quite clearly conforms to the Act and regulations, so we don't have anywhere to go that way. But that seems to be a fairly large amount. I did look at the new regulation that supersedes the recent one on various aspects of aggregate resources development as part of the Aggregate Resources Act. And effective April 1st, 2021, if there is a significant amount of inert fill being proposed, there has to be a statement as to volumes and quantities and qualities, basically, and that sort of thing. But that does not apply until April 1st. So that will change, but it doesn't change anything as far as they're concerned at the moment.
Jane, I would just ask, I have no further questions or comments on the recommendations. But what is the timeline around the peer reviews? Do you have a sense of when we'll see those?
I am not sure. There's still, I think, 2 peer reviews outstanding. I think the applicant may have a better sense
Okay.
of that, but
All right.
my understanding is it would be a minimum of another month to 2 months before they're complete.
Right, okay. Okay, Brian, I believe you wanted to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you able to hear?
Yes?
Thank you again, and through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Moiko, thank you for Graham's interest in the application. I just wanted to provide a quick opportunity just to clarify. I know you've indicated that you haven't had a chance to complete the detailed review, but I thank Ms. Gurney for providing a bit of an overview of the application, but I just wanted to confirm for your organization that the woodland is not part of the extractive plans at all for the operation. There will be an environmental setback from that will be tree planted and enhanced at the outset of the operation. And the other aspects of the operation it has been designed with an ecological enhancement plan that will result in expanding the Elks Wood in the long term by almost 2.6 hectares, creation of another 3 hectares of new woodlands. There's also going to be 1.78 hectares of tall grass prairie and Samantha habitats. There's a complement of wildlife shrub patches that will be added, and a key component also is including an ecological linkage right now to help connect Elkswood to the Cedar Creek and Edwardly core environmental features. So I just want to let your organization know that there has been thorough environmental investigation completed. The Grand River Conservation Authority has reviewed and they've signed off on the application. And ultimately, with the work that's being done and as part of the operation, this operation will continue to allow for a vibrant natural environment that will be enhanced, and also the property will be restored to a viable working farm that it currently exists today. So I appreciate the opportunity. I just wanted to provide some clarification since the member hasn't had an opportunity to review it.
Can I respond to you?
Just a second, Greg. Thank you, Brian. I would just like to add a little bit of clarification. Other than the buffer and setback, which is going to happen at the start of the pit operation, all of the rest of the aspects that you talked about, the linkage, the replantings and such, happen as part of the rehabilitation plan. Is that not correct, Brian?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so timing on that is, of course, several years down the road. But so, okay, Greg.
Yes, our organization, particularly myself and John Jackson, are well aware of our own experience in EEAC with the mechanics of aggregate applications, of the hydrological mining features, all the other things, and particularly rehabilitation as well. Should point out that a PhD study of aggregate rehabilitation in southern Ontario, focused on Waterloo region, showed that, this was done in 2013, showed that the record was miserable, abysmal. So there is reason to be skeptical, and I mean skeptical in a positive fashion, of the ability of the aggregate industry to properly undertake rehabilitation. I've seen some schemes that were excellent, but by and large, it has been quite miserable. And for this reason, we'd like, without the duress of COVID preventing us from seeing any documents, to have the time to make some fair assessments and to communicate them in professional fashion too.
Thank you, Greg. Brian, another response?
Through you again, Mr. Chair, and again, I appreciate the comments today. On behalf of CRH, they are looking to see if the committee will move forward with staff's recommendation this evening. And with respect to Graham's comments about rehabilitation in general, I think this committee is familiar with the applicant. They do have a very good track record of rehabilitation, both within the region of Waterloo as well as extending. And some of those examples have been shared and even most recently shared with the committee on some of the ecological justice work that they were just completing down on another site. So I can't speak directly to the study that you referred to, but I can speak in the context of today's application. The applicant that is before EAC does have a very strong record and one of the best in terms of rehabilitation in this province. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Can you comment on my question about the timeline on the peer reviews, the outstanding peer reviews?
I think, again, Mr. Chair, I think Ms. Gurney had it corrected. We would expect that we would be getting peer reviews in approximately 1 to 2 months, but the natural environment report has already been reviewed by the Grand River Conservation Authority, and some of the peer reviews that are still outstanding are related to other matters such as air, quality, noise. That would be sort of matters outside of the context of EAC committee, would be water, air, cultural heritage, and agricultural. But I think the 1 to 2 month timeline is appropriate.
Thank you. I guess I'd open it up for comments from other EAC members now. And Jane, if you have any further to add at this point in time. Tim?
Hello.
Hello.
Greg, I just want to take a minute and thank you for your time, excuse me, both in coming here to speak and in going to Alps Woodland this morning to talk to people. It's really important that folks like yourself go and talk to the community and find out what's happening. And so I really appreciate you coming here and speaking to us about this. Your request for a couple more months seems to me, we've heard there are a lot of requests like this because of COVID. You're not alone in dealing with issues. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you would do in those 2 months, what kind of things you would gather and information you would pursue.
Greg, go ahead. I think your mic is off.
There he goes.
Is this fine?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, we'd like to, we appreciate from our own experience on EAC, the amount of work that goes into preparing reports by the proponent, by the consultants, by some of the peer reviews and other agencies, and in this case, we haven't had a chance to look at any of them. And my experience in EAC was that often the public had some very good insights to things that weren't apparent to, for instance, the team doing biological inventories and making only a few visits, and yet somebody who had been in the area for a long time would have had the opportunity of, in effect, more sampling days of observations to find the rarities. One of the men I spoke to this morning said he'd been visiting Alps Woods for 58 years. So that's a considerable amount of experience. Then we would like to put together our comments in a brief on paper, supported by evidence as well as opinion, but labeled as such so that it's known that some is a point of view, others could be considered as professional comments for our own experience, others providing views of what the community feels like, and that they should not be ignored.
Is that all?
It's Wayne. I have a quick question to Jane.
Yes, sorry.
I've written down the number of peer reviews. There's hydrology, air quality, noise, cultural heritage, and agriculture. Is that the sum total of the peer reviews being undertaken?
I'm not sure if there was a heritage peer review as well. Sorry, I would defer to is that correct? So I see Brian shaking his head. I think that there was missing a heritage impact assessment review as well.
Okay. So there are 5 peer reviews underway. Is that a fair statement then?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, all right.
And Brian, you had your hand up?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just offer this as maybe a potential solution for this evening is still an ask for EAC to consider the recommendation today, but just to let Mr. Malenko know and his organization that this application still has to go forward to the Township of North Dumfries for rezoning, and there still is opportunity prior to that approval to provide comments that can be considered as part of the public review process in making a final decision before the township. So that may provide an opportunity for Dufferin to continue in the process this evening, but also giving Mr. Malenko's organization an opportunity to still provide public that will feed into the public process prior to the rezoning application being considered by the township.
Thank you for that, and I guess I look to Jane for a little bit of insight too as to timing. With the peer reviews still outstanding and recognizing that some of those aren't within our purvey, but a couple of them are, for sure, the agriculture and such. Is it reasonable to suggest that we hold a decision until we see those peer reviews, or I guess I'm looking at what's best practice here?
I don't know if the subcommittee thinks that there's anything in those peer reviews that may change their recommendation this evening. My sense prior to now was that there wasn't, that wasn't anticipated. So I would certainly defer to whatever is most comfortable for the committee members in that regard.
Yeah, fair enough, and I think that's a very accurate description. Is that certainly in any of the reports that we have seen, they've been really well done, and very few concerns or questions raised by committee members. And I think, like you, I wouldn't anticipate these peer reviews identifying anything significant.
I would, certainly not with respect to the woodland feature or the
Right.
users of it, if that's the concern.
Right, yes. So, again, I'll open it up to other committee members for any further comments or feedback or suggestions. Seeing no hand, Kate?
I just had a question either to staff or to the subcommittee members. In the EIS, was there any review of impacts to potential trail users within the Sudner-Drennan tract? Is that something that was explored? And were there any recommendations for mitigation, or were there impacts identified?
No, there was nothing in the reports related to Alps Woods other than the portion of Alps Woods that abuts that is part of the property, but it's not part of the extraction area. And to my knowledge, there's no trails or users in that portion of the woods. All of the trails are across the road to the south and west, is my understanding. Any other comments from the committee? If not, I would ask for motion for either approval of the recommendation, or if you wish to defer, I motioned for deferral. Any takers?
I mean, I think it's appropriate to defer given the climate of COVID, and we have a member of the public who's saying that there are more concerns from the public and there hasn't been time to have them aired. I recognize that there are multiple channels for public consultation, but I think it's important that we offer all of those channels. And this committee is one. So if Greg's asking for 2 months to work with the Grand River Environmental Network and prepare more public input, I think that is reasonable given the climate that COVID has created.
Thank you, Tim. So do I take that as a motion from you?
Yeah.
Seconder for that motion?
Yes, I'll second that motion. I have a question for Jane, though, if I may.
Certainly.
Yes?
Can you hear?
Yes, yes, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Jane, you know if North Dumfries has set a date for the
For this, the
Review?
statutory, I don't believe that there's a date set for the statutory meeting yet, no. I think that there was a public meeting at one point, an information meeting, and I would, again, refer to the applicant. I'm not entirely sure if that was the ARA meeting or if it was a township meeting, but I believe there has been at least one public meeting to date. But as far as I know, the statutory meeting has not been scheduled yet, pending results from the peer reviews.
so the statutory meeting would be, that's a public process as well.
Yes.
Brian, can you clarify? But I'm not aware of a North Dumfries public meeting on this particular event.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd have to, I can confidently confirm for the group the statutory public meeting has not happened yet. I'd have to check my calendar to see if there was an opportunity, and again, that's where I hope that the committee would understand that today's just allowing this process to continue in that statutory public meeting, and even through the Agri-Resource Act process, will be there'll be opportunity for additional public input, and those are appropriate forums to consider any information that Grant wants to provide to the applicant as well as to the approval authorities, and allowing this process to move forward today would be helpful for the applicant. And it's not that we're trying to rush things through COVID. It has been in process for a while. The documents have been available for review, and I'm just confirming for committee members, there still will be ample opportunity for any comments to be received and considered.
Okay, thank you. Jane, clarification. If we were to defer for 2 months as per the motion on the table, does that stop the rest of the process that Brian's talking about? Does it also defer any of that proceeding, or can some of that proceed in the absence of recommendation being approved by us?
I don't want to speak for North Dumfries because
Right.
it's their process, but since they don't have a meeting set, I believe all the review process will continue. But again, we're a piece of that, so they're
Right.
waiting for input. From the region's perspective, we would stop this process, this part of the process,
Correct.
until
Right.
there's an EAC recommendation.
Right.
And that would include the region's final response on the application.
Right.
I'm not sure if that helps, or if that's what you were asking
Yeah,
for clarification on.
I think it is. Think it helps. So certainly some of the other cogs will continue to carry on if we
Yes,
were to defer. And our deferral may or may not delay the North Dumfries statutory meeting because we don't know when it
Right.
is
We're-
scheduled for.
That's right, there's certainly a number of pieces that will go into that.
Right.
And I think in the grand scheme of things, we're not the biggest piece to their puzzle from their perspective.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so we have, okay,
I'm just curious, Greg, if there was a rationale for requesting 1 or 2 months, and if one might be a moderate in between, something that we would know could fit within the ongoing process and not hold things up, but would allow you enough time to actually review the documents.
How about 6 weeks?
I guess the problem is that we're on a monthly meeting cycle, so it would be nice to fit within that cycle.
No, I think more than a month is needed. We have to get the documents, we have to read them, we have to do it with due deliberation and dedication.
Catherine, I believe you had your hand up?
Yeah, it was a similar line of thought to Kate. I mean, given that it's extenuating COVID times and it's trying to find a compromise, right? Like, we understand that the documents and reports have been available for a while, and yet because COVID, the public couldn't have as easily access as they would normally have. Like, that's extenuating circumstances. Is there a way to maybe compromise and do it in a month? And I understand, Greg, that more time is beneficial in terms of reviewing comprehensively, but in lieu of a complete motion to take the recommendations, if 1 month would suffice, because I understand that 2 months can be problematic potentially for North Dumfries as well. So it's trying to balance, a lot of interests while still kind of giving opportunities to for additional public input. So it was the same thing I thought that Kate had.
Thanks, Catherine. Tim, I can't recall specifically whether you mentioned 1 month or 2 months in your, I think maybe you mentioned 2 months. Would you be amenable to a modification to 1 month deferral?
I mentioned 2 months because that's what Greg had requested, and I think that's a reasonable amount of time to review a file of this complexity. I would, if Greg is okay with 1 month, then we can amend the motion. I understand the points about multiple competing interests, but I would defer to our member of the public who requested that.
No, we would like 2 months. We recognize the timeframes of such proposals, and probably these things have been planned for several years now. Another 2 months, particularly in view of COVID, that we had no chance to see the documents. Did not know this meeting was occurring until Friday, when I got the email with the agenda in it. So that was a big surprise.
Just in terms of operations, so if we were to agree to a 2 month deferral, I think implicit in that would be that we would want your feedback in no more than 6 weeks, so that we would have time to consider it before our next meeting 2 months from now.
I think that's fair. Give you a couple of weeks to look at our written report rather than just having to spring it on you at the meeting.
Right. So, okay, so in consideration of that, then, I would suggest, Tim, that your motion is for a deferral or a decision by our committee for 2 months to allow Greg and his group to provide review and comments within no more than 6 weeks. And if that's a reasonable paraphrasing of your motion, is that okay?
That's fine.
Yes, that's reasonable.
Okay, and Joe as seconder, is that okay?
That's fine, yes, thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion then? If not, I would ask that you indicate all in favor. Any in favor? So, 7. So, and any opposed? Okay, 1 opposed, I believe.
No, I think her hand was up before.
Okay, all right. So that is carried then. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Greg, for your input. Thank you, Brian, as well, for your contributions. And I appreciate you making yourself available tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, members of the committee.
Okay. So, I believe that completes that particular item. Item 3B is Regional Official Plan Review Update. Jane, I believe you're going to speak to this.
Sure. And this is an update to the continual theme that you've been seeing, I think, in the last few meetings, just to let you know that the core environmental features mapping that we presented at the last meeting was posted for public input. We've received public input and we'll be reviewing all of those. There wasn't any major changes, and there was some recognition of the changes that have been made over the last 10 years as environmental impact statements have been completed for various properties. So that phase should be done later this year. And then in addition, we are launching a public input phase, which should be available this Friday. And it's questions that we looked at EAC previously, but they were vetted through our communications people. So they're a bit broader and more general maybe than the version that was presented to EAC previously. So that survey is intended to open up on this Friday, and that will help us gauge what knowledge and support there might be for environmental policies generally and environmental features. And once we receive that feedback, which is scheduled to be open for 4 weeks, there'll be a council report coming forward with an update on the environmental component of the rock review, and it looks like we'll also be focused from here on out on matters of conformity. So to ensure that we conform and are consistent with the provincial policy statement and the Planning Act and the growth plan. Sorry, not the Planning Act so much as the growth plan in particular. So changes that have been made, we need to ensure that our terminology and things are consistent with those. So that will be the bulk of the work that is coming forward with the intent of preserving the protective policies that we have currently. So the survey the website is the one that we've provided previously, and there is a link in item 4B as well.
Right. So this is actually covering 3B as well as 4B.
Yes.
Any questions from the committee? Comments? Thoughts? Not seeing any hands. So thank you, Jeannie. We'll move on to item 3C, listing of trees and shrubs native to the regional municipality Waterloo, invasive alien herbaceous species.
At a meeting last year, we had reviewed this document briefly at one of the site visits when we were looking at conservation easements. So I apologize to the people that were newer that may not have noticed. Sorry, Ken's trying to get the camera on me and I'm fighting it, so we'll see. Sorry. So I think I lost, so. Thank you.
Are we?
All or nothing, I think.
There's only the two.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So
I
we.
see Jane, but.
We reviewed, or took a look at the listing, I should say, last year. And there was discussion about whether it would be most appropriate to update it or if we should be using other resources in lieu of this, since it's basically duplicating it, or if there's a need to update it. And so with the input we received, we were just wanted to bring it back and see if there was interest from members of the committee that would be interested in taking a run at this, recognizing that there's sort of an unequal distribution of work among the committee. So if people are interested and have some time available right now, they might be interested in taking a look at this list and coming back in the future with an update to EAC, either with recommendations or suggestions, or even an inventory of other areas and what they're using. So that was the primary purpose of bringing that back tonight as an agenda item.
Any comments from the committee? Kate?
So, yeah, just to expand on what Jane had said, it's kind of a two-part project. It is our technical list, and so we're interested in anyone who would have the ecological expertise to have a look at the list and ensure that it is remains to be up to date and as useful as possible. But we're also thinking about it as a communications tool. The list is available, but we've heard both from our municipal partners and consultants in the area that they are surprised that we're using a resource from 1993 still and that it's dated. And so looking at it as a communications tool as well, is a static list the best way to communicate this information? Is there a web resource and or a way of connecting people to the best sources of information on regional species? So an overall recommendations on how best to communicate that information to people that are looking for it as well.
Thank you, Kate. Catherine?
Yeah, I just had a question for whoever ends up potentially tackling this. Like, would they have access to any of like the open, maybe it's not open data, but data that all the partners have, like Region of Waterloo, municipalities, GRCA, in terms of updating this list? So you're not just doing it from what you know in the area, but like what's also been documented. Like how would the process go, I guess?
So Kate, did you?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We do have a wealth of information internally at the region. Some of it's dated and some of it is up to date based on recent studies and reviews. You would have access to all of that. And we can also work with our partner organizations to make sure that you have access to the data. We would want the resource to be as accurate as possible, and so making sure that you had the best information possible would be a high priority.
In forming the working group, is there opportunity to enlist individuals from the public or other interest groups along with the EAC members? I guess I'm posing that to you, Kate.
Yeah, I can see that working. In terms of the committee structure for an advisory committee, we are allowed to have working groups that have additional members, so that would be a legitimate way of using our processes.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, did you have your hand up again?
Tim does.
Oh, Tim did, okay. I saw a hand somewhere.
Is there any sense, and maybe this is a question for Kate, but any sense of a timeline on this? I am interested in working on it, but I have kind of a busy rest of the year, so I'm not sure when the expected turnaround is.
Jane can comment on this as well, but right now there isn't a timeline associated with the project. We felt that it was something that we could bring forward to the committee because the committee had identified it as something they would like to work on. And also that we have heard from various partners in the community that they are looking for an improvement as well. If it is something that people have energy or interest in, but the timing is not ideal, we can work towards that in terms of making it fit within, the upcoming months. But there isn't a date that we're working towards or a deliverable.
Thanks, Kate. Ryan?
Joe has his hand up as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question in terms of the makeup of the working group. I don't know if some members of the committee have a technical background in plants and vegetation. Personally, it's not my strongest suit, so I'm not sure if I would be the best person for that, but I guess barring EAC committee membership from the technical perspective on this, whether there would be other individuals brought in external then to handle that part of things.
Thanks, Ryan, and that was kind of where my question was leading to, is if the EAC members that formed the working group felt that there were gaps in their technical expertise, then hopefully they could seek external representation to acquire that expertise, and with guidance from Kate or others as to who those other technical experts in the public might be. So, Joe, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. It's just kind of wondering whether Chris Gosselin has too much time on his hands right now. Well, he'd be an excellent resource. Also going to point out too that a lot of this information, maybe not as specific as you would like, but a lot of this can be got through Grand River GRCA. They have a great list of indigenous plants and trees and that sort of stuff. As well as rare. Rare is another great resource. I would imagine maybe something, if you could bring some of those folks into this discussion, that might be very helpful, and that might make the path a little bit smoother going forward.
Thanks, Joe. So I guess at this point in time, we're looking for actual volunteers to sit on this working group. And Tim, you kind of tentatively put your name in the hat.
Happy to formally put my name in the hat with the hope that others will join me and we can work on a flexible timeline.
Okay. And Ryan, would I be out of order by thinking that since you spoke to it, that you might be interested too?
Well, I can assist in any way that I can. Again, I'm working with others on the working group. I'm happy to participate in this.
Okay. And Natalie, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I'm keen to help out and participate in this working group.
Thank you. And Catherine, what about you? Are you? Fair enough. She's shaking her head no.
No, I just wanted more information for anyone who wanted to jump in. I would call myself a expert vegetation biologist for the Waterloo region, so.
You say you would?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, okay. So we have Tim, Ryan, and Natalie. Anybody else wish to put their name in the ring at this point in time? Okay, thank you to those three, and certainly I think there were good suggestions from Joe there about Chris Goslin and someone from GRCA and Rare as individuals that could be approached by your working group. So, thank you. Anything else on that particular item? All right, other business. Item A, appointments to EAC and other committees. Jane, do you want to speak to this?
Certainly. So a number of people are coming to the end of their terms, which are now 2 years. I think there was some confusion about whether they were continued to be 4-year terms or 2-year terms. So letters went out from the clerk's office to anyone whose term was ending, and we certainly hope to see people reapply. If you're interested in continuing, you do need to go through that process of indicating your interest to continue. And then the call for applications closes October 9th. We'd also share a request to share this notice or this request for volunteers with your networks and your colleagues, especially the more technical areas of expertise. We always have challenges with hydrogeological reviews, and the hydrogeologists on the team are limited. Similarly with people with ecological consulting backgrounds, engineering generally. So some of the more technical positions or technical roles, we have a more challenging time in filling generally. So please, we would appreciate if you could share the call for appointments with any of your networks.
Thanks, Jane, and I'd just like to emphasize that as well. It'd be great to have a plethora of applicants that would be interested in participating on the committee. So I think there's lots of expertise out there in the public, and it's just a matter of trying to connect with them and get them engaged. Wayne?
Yeah, quick question for Jane. I'm close to, if not at the end of my term. And I think I may have gotten a special extension, but I don't know how to check and confirm that one way or the other. And I did not receive a letter.
Okay, it does look like that your term would be done the end of this year.
Yep, that's
So,
what I thought.
yeah, so certainly you're welcome to contact me to let me know what you would like to do and proceeding.
Is it not necessary to take a year off?
It is, yes. So
Okay.
the way it's termed is, but when I say necessary, if we didn't have any applicants, then we can request an extension through council.
Okay.
So
All right.
it is a council appointment.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this particular item? Seeing none, then we'll move on to item 4C, Aggregate Resources of Ontario Standards. And Wayne, I believe you were going to speak to this.
Yes, very briefly, the provincial government passed a regulation 422/20 that updates the previous regulation with regard to various aspects of the Aggregate Resources Act. Some of them are in place now. It was early September when it was promulgated. Some of them do not come into effect until April 1st, 2021. Just very briefly, new site plan standards, new report standards, new consultation standards, some different agency circulation standards, and site plan amendment standards as well as operating. So a lot of new things coming. Some of them are in place now, but as of April 1st, there will be some changes that we would be interested in knowing about with regard to any of the applications that are on it thereafter. That's it for me.
Thank you, Wayne. Questions, comments from the committee members or staff?
Maybe I could just add one other thing, if I may. The professions that can prepare and certify a site plan have been extended. It used to be for many years. Ontario land surveyors, professional engineers, and one other that escapes me at the moment. Landscape architects. Or special dispensations, which a number of us have had for 20 years. They've expanded it to add professional geoscientists and professional planners. So that sort of broadens the aspect of people who can prepare and certify site plans.
Catherine?
Sorry, Wayne, did you say professional planners?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions, thoughts from the committee? Joe?
No, and I maybe just mention that Mayor Foxton from North Dumfries, and I'm not sure what the acronym of the organization that she sits on, but she's very, very well versed in the Aggregate Act, and you know, she could, I'm sure if you wanted to discuss any of these issues with her, she would be more than willing. She sits on, Jane, do you remember the name of the group that she sits on?
I think, is it Aggregate Exporting Municipalities of Ontario?
Something like that.
Something AMO or something, I think.
Yeah.
It's Large Aggregate Producers Group.
Yeah.
There are, I think, 10 municipalities, Caledon, obviously, Puzzlunch, North Dumfries, et cetera. They have Tapmo, that's what it's called.
That's it, that's the one, yeah. Anyway, she's also well versed if you want to get some opinion from her at one point or not. So just a thought.
Yeah. Good suggestion. Any other comments at all? Seeing none, then we'll move on to the next item, which is project updates for active EAC working groups. Project or project?
Yes, that's, as long as it's
Project.
spelled right, I don't mind how you pronounce it, so. I don't have many updates. A number of, or earlier this summer, we identified some priority projects that we were anticipating coming in, because we were told they were. Some of them are still outstanding, so we haven't seen some of those. I've been promised them this month, but this month's almost over, so I'm afraid I don't have a good update on timeline for people. In particular, the Creekside applications are the ones that we were trying to get through, and so just as an update, I'm not sure when they'll be arriving. And then I think we are looking at also taking the terms of reference, the EAC terms of reference, picking that back up as well.
And if I recall, you were able to get enough volunteers last meeting
Yes.
to populate those working groups.
Yes, I was just trying to make it work with everyone's schedule, and I know that some people had indicated they had commitments coming up in the fall, so if we need to move anyone around, we can certainly do that.
Right. And certainly you're willing to accept anybody who wishes to volunteer at any
yes,
time.
Any committee member would be fantastic, yes.
Yes. Okay, next item then.
Sorry, Catherine.
Oh, sorry, Catherine.
Do I have to like formally request paper copies now, like through you, or do I have to send that to an email to you, Jane? It's just like during COVID times to try and reduce the amount of time I'm on a monitor looking at plans and reading reports.
I will try and remember to do that, but certainly just let me know, because everything is coming in electronically now. We can still request the hard copies.
Yeah, I just didn't want to delay, like, in terms of review, if you needed to know, like, in advance or something.
And I did ask for the Creekside in particular. I have asked for hard copies. So hopefully that will expedite that a little bit.
Okay, any other comments or things to share? If not, next meeting is tentatively scheduled for October 26th to be confirmed by about 10 days prior to that. So stay tuned. And with that, is there any other business? So we'll look for a motion to adjourn then.
Vote to adjourn.
Thank you, Wayne. Seconder? Thanks, Natalie. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. And all the best.
Take care.
Thank you, have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.